On today's World Insight, South Korea's defense ministry says the DPRK has launched 2 unidentified projectiles off its eastern coast. What does it signal? And Iran has the second deadliest coronavirus outbreak in the world. How will geopolitics affect Iran's containment response? And finally, the scientific community scrambles to find a drug that can cure patients sickened by the new coronavirus. What treatments are in the pipeline? And here's our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. The program is coming to you from Beijing. I am Tian Wei. Let's start with the latest situation on coronavirus in Iran. The country is reporting over 1,500 confirmed cases with dozens of fatalities, making it the worst hit country in the Middle East. Some top Iranian officials were also infected. China's ambassador to Iran says medical supplies and disease control experts from China have started to arrive in the country. Before we get down to the discussion, let's take a look at this.
COVID-19 is spreading rapidly in Iran. Iran said Monday that the novel coronavirus had killed 12 more people, raising the country's overall death toll to 66, which is the highest number outside China. The number of confirmed cases leapt by more than 500 from the previous day to a total of 1,501. Several officials, including the Iranian Deputy Health Minister, one of the country's vice presidents, and the head of the Security and Foreign Affairs Committee, are among those who tested positive.
I would like to inform you that I have been infected with the coronavirus. I had a fever yesterday. My first test was positive last night, and I have isolated myself. They informed me a few minutes ago that my final test definitely is positive. I'm starting my treatment, and my general condition is not bad.
Amid concerns over the outbreak, Friday prayers in over 2/3 of the country's provinces have been suspended. Schools in Iran have also closed. Earlier, the Iranian Health Ministry warned of a relatively difficult week ahead, saying the main peak of the disease is this week and in the coming days. China's ambassadors to Iran said the first batch of medical supplies donated by China has arrived, which includes testing kits and masks. And disease control experts from China have been sent to Iran to help. Iran also received medical supplies from the World Health Organization. A 4-person WHO team is expected to arrive in Iran on Monday evening.
For more on the COVID-19 outbreak in Iran, we are joined first of all in Tehran, Iran, by Ganbar Nadari, who is a journalist and political commentator. Mr. Nadari, welcome to our program. We feel so sorry for the situation in Iran. Tell me more about the latest situation, not only in your capital city, but also around the country.
Well, the country is struggling at the moment. As you know, schools, universities, and cultural centers, including major events, have been cancelled or shut down. The transport system has been hit the hardest. The small business community has been hit the hardest, especially given the fact that we are very close to the Iranian New Year in late March, in March 21. So the business is down, the mood is down, but of course, as you know, the officials are working round the clock to contain the virus. We know that about 1,000 people have been affected so far, but the number is going to be bigger than that because these numbers belong to last week and the tests that were carried out last week. So expect a higher number of deaths and, of course, those who have been infected over the next few days or so. But the government, the armed forces, the IRGC are also helping the health ministry officials and our top doctors and nurses in order to bring the situation under control.
Okay.
This is the peak week of the virus infection. I think it's going to be much bigger over the next few days.
Mr. Nadari, tell me more about, first of all, the politicians inside your country, the Vice President, the Vice Minister of Health, together with several political leaders who claim that they actually was infected when they were at the parliament sessions. What it is their latest situations
I think people, the authorities should come to their senses and realize that this is a serious situation. We need them to show some seriousness about the situation, and at the same time we need them to take responsibility. But how on earth are they going to show their responsibilities when they themselves have been infected? That is a hard question that many people are asking here in the capital, Tehran, that has slowly become a ghost town. Many people are refusing to leave their houses. Many schools, as I told you, public places have been closed. We don't see any kids on the streets anymore. The transport system has been hit the hardest. But as I told you, we need our officials to show that they are taking the situation seriously. If they don't, I don't think others are going to do the same thing.
What about the Revolutionary Guards? We understand the latest news is the Revolutionary Guards are now in the streets of Tehran, and they are taking advantage of some of the equipments they could use during a chemical warfare. In fact, the vehicles and also the equipments in order to maintain the order in the streets and also to try to kill the virus, as they believe. Meanwhile, you also have the ordinary military people on the streets as well. What is the division of labors there in your newly updated system to fight the virus? Could you give us a bigger picture? What exactly is the structure, the mechanism?
Well, the medical community of this country is not prepared and ready to take up so much pressure when it comes to the containment and the cure of those who have been affected. We are talking about many provinces and cities and towns. Until yesterday, we had the city of Qom as the epicenter, but now it is the capital, Tehran. Obviously, the situation has got out of control of the health ministry officials and the medical community. That's why the armed forces, the IRGC and the police are also taking matters into their own hands and are helping other responsible authorities in order to disinfect the affected areas in the capital and beyond. But this is not enough. I think we also need the help of the international community. So far, China has been the first to help us, and of course the World Health Organization. But when it comes to Europe, I haven't seen any help yet.
Mr. Nadari, you brought up a very important question, that is, what about Iran under this very extreme circumstances? What's going to happen from the rest of the world? What about the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros' comment recently that we should focus at this moment, in his words, which means, he suggests, that we should focus our attention on fighting against this outbreak rather than so much attention on the bans of goods and also imports to Iran and sanctions against Iran. What about that comment responded by the general public in Iran?
Well, the containment strategy in China helped the international community to buy some time in order to prepare themselves for the spread of the virus, this deadly disease. But lack of it in Iran, and at the same time US sanctions and pressures are going to spend it away. So authorities of the World Health Organization are completely right to say that Iran needs to see some sanctions lifted, especially when it comes to the purchase of medical equipment, face masks, and of course sanitary items. So far, America refuses to do that. I think the American government, the Trump administration officials should come to their senses and realize that if Iran becomes the next Wuhan, the next epicenter of the virus, I'm afraid they are going to be affected too. Their economies are also going to go down, just as the way Iran's local economy has gone down so far. So they shouldn't think that this is a political issue. They shouldn't look at their foreign policy as a hostile policy towards Iran. Right now we are talking about public health. Right now we are talking about a global threat to global economy, to global health. And that is going to start from Iran. If they don't help Iran, if they don't lift their sanctions, in order to allow our medical community to bring in the necessary medical equipment in order to treat and contain this deadly epidemic.
Mr. Nadari, as far as the media report suggested, earlier the U.S. president was trying to suggest that all Iran needs to do is to ask the U.S. for help, quote unquote. Is Iran going to do that? And what do you make of, I mean, Tehran, you're not representing the government, but what people think about those so-called offer of help from your perspective?
Well, both sides are doing this for domestic consumption. From here, they want to show themselves tough to the ordinary Iranians. On the other side, the Trump administration officials are trying to tell their voters, look, we are trying to help the Iranian government and the people of Iran. We are not targeting the ordinary Iranians. So they are also doing it for domestic consumption. But at the end of the day, I think we need cooler heads on both sides. I think that these two sides should come to their senses. They have no right to play with the well-being and of the ordinary citizens, public health. They should put aside their differences for the time being, at least for a period of 2 or 3 months, and lift the sanctions regime, and on the part of Iran to ask for help from the international community, including the U.S., in order to bring the situation under control. After that, they are free to do whatever they want to do.
Mr. Nadary, I understand you're journalists, are very passionate about your people. Let me ask you this. The U.S. president was also earlier suggesting, oh, we have the best doctors, and therefore we can send in the doctors. But the question really is, what does Iran need now? Is it about the test kits? Is it about medical supply? Or is it about a bunch of doctors? What does Iran need now? From your reporting around Tehran and other cities, what is the latest situation?
That's a good question. We needed detection kits for the coronavirus. We didn't get it from Europe or America. We got it from China. So these are the things that we need. We have top doctors and nurses. We don't need American nurses or doctors here. We need the banking system to ease the sanctions on Iran in order to purchase other things. We need medical equipment. We need sanitary items. We need also basic goods and services from international markets. For that to happen, we need an easing of banking restrictions on Iran.
I see. And another question before we go to invite a Chinese guest into our discussion, Mr. Nadary, is about the cultural and religious traditions. Now, I understand one man who is trying to pose in a video which went going viral in Iran, trying to kiss the handles of the door to go defiant against the public health advice about not to touch too much of public surfaces and things like that, have been actually accused and also arrested, if I understand. But the thing is, some of the traditional and religious traditions do not go hand in hand with the latest health advice regarding this outbreak. So how do we see a society trying to negotiate within itself in a very time-limited area and in a very time-limited matter?
Well, the virus doesn't know religion, border, or ethnic, background. It has nothing to do with these and everything to do with health. I think our religious leaders should also realize that this is a very serious situation. They also need to take some responsibility and tell the ordinary Iranians not to visit the holy shrines and holy sites for the time being and take care of themselves and their families. That's the message that we want also to hear from our religious leaders, and they need to do that as soon as possible. As I told you, it is going to affect everybody here if they don't take the matter seriously. They need to take the matter seriously, just like China and just like the rest of the international civil society, before it is too late.
Mr. Nadary, stay with us. I can feel the passion you have for your country and your people at this critical moment. For now, let me bring in on the phone Ambassador Hua Liming, the former Chinese ambassador to Iran. Ambassador Hua, thank you for waiting, and please tell me your response to the words just being expressed by your Iranian counterpart.
I can understand Mr. Nadary's tensions, because the Iranians are very concerned about the breakout of the virus. Personally, I think I'm totally sympathetic to the people of Iran, and I'm very much concerned about the situation in Iran.
Yeah, Ambassador Hua, I understand a small team of Chinese doctors who have been having rich experience of fighting COVID-19 since its outbreak in China is now already in Iran and being interacting with the Chinese embassy and the also Iranian health personnel. Anything that you can update us about, and how do you think this kind of a collaboration and support could be?
You see, China and Iran are strategic partners, and a very good strategic partners relationship has been established 4 and 5 years before. And I remember 1 month before, when the breakout in China's Wuhan, Iranian Foreign Minister Mr. Javad Zarif were among the first foreign ministers who called the Chinese foreign minister to express their sympathy and their support to China. And the same thing last Friday, Mr. Wang Yi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, called Javad Zarif and expressed China's sympathy and China's support for Iranians, and announced that China will send 15,000 testing kits to Iran and send some personnel to Iran for consultations. I think that the 4 people now are in Iran. Although they are not working in the site, but they are giving very good consultations to our Iranian, because these people have very good experience in Wuhan.
Ambassador Hua, we also noticed that Iran was one of the very first countries which sent face masks to China during the very early stage of China's outbreak of COVID-19, and certainly demonstrated their friendship toward China. Now, is this offer from China a return of friendship, or is this a continuity of China's engagement with Iran? And how is this also interact with other common interests that the two countries have, for example, economic interest, for example, energy interest, Ambassador Hua?
Of course, and China, I think the whole nation of China is very sympathetic, and China can share her experience in Wuhan with Iran when the problem, the virus breakouts in the cities of Iran.
Yeah, Ambassador Hua, we have very limited time, but as a seasoned analyst, looking at the latest situation in Iran for a long time, what would you suggest the international community to do, China included, of course, in this, to help and support Iran to go through this very difficult time? I mean, the Iranian people, of course, we're talking about here.
I think COVID-19 is a global disaster, and no nation in the world could be immune from this disaster. So all nations should work together, should cooperate together to give up all kinds of hostilities and zero-sum games, international games, and let all the people, all nations can cooperate, including the U.S. and Iran. I don't think the U.S. and Iran are enemies in fighting against the COVID-19 virus. The energy problems, the banking system, all should be lifted against Iran.
Okay.
If there is another virus in the world, I think for Iran the biggest virus is U.S. sanctions. The sanctions should be lifted against Iran.
And also, we want to invite back Mr. Nadari, who's been listening. Your final words, sir, before we wrap up.
Well, just as the way the Iranians stood behind their Chinese counterparts in their darkest hours about 1 month ago, now the Chinese people and the government are standing behind Iran. This is a huge relief for the Iranian community, for ordinary Iranians, and from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of millions of Iranians here, I would like to extend my gratitude and thank you to each and every one of you back in China, especially the government and especially the embassy of China here that worked around the clock in order to import those detection kits to the capital and send, of course, medical staff to Iran to help with their experiences with us in order to contain the virus. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you also very much, Mr. Naderi. And also our hearts, of course, goes to the people in Iran. This is a global fight, so we all need to be together, not just China and Iran, but everybody on this earth. This is not a slogan, it's a reality. Thank you so much, Gambar Naderi in Iran, and earlier on the phone, Ambassador Hua Liming. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. South Korea's defense ministry says the DPRK has launched the 2 unidentified projectiles of its eastern coast. What does it significant? Welcome back. South Korea's defense ministry says the DPRK has launched the 2 unidentified projectiles off its eastern coast. It comes just after the 1-year anniversary of the failed Hanoi summit between DPRK leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. South Korea is now monitoring for additional launches. Kim Jong-un oversaw military drills last Friday, a rare public outing amid efforts to prevent the COVID-19 outbreak in this part of the world. And joining us through Skype, we have Mr. Zhao Tong. He is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. He's now based in Beijing. Mr. Zhao, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Tell me more about your reaction to the 2 projectiles being sent by DPRK today, Monday, toward the water between the North and also Japan.
Looks like the 2 projectiles flew for a range of about 240 kilometers, with the highest point being about 35 kilometers. That looks like a short-range ballistic missile, maybe the KN-24 that North Korea tested last year, or it could also be a KN-23, which is a longer, slightly longer range missile, but North Korea could use a depressed trajectory to make the actual range shorter. Another possibility is one of the North Koreans' multiple launch rocket systems that use large caliber rocket artillery to shoot the projectiles. Either way, this test looks like a continuation of the North Korean military drill on Friday. At that time, North Korea conducted a massive artillery fire drill, and this could be an effort to send a signal that North Korea should not be forgotten at a time when international leaders are paying their attention elsewhere.
So you're suggesting, Mr. Zhao, this is more symbolic than anything else. Is that what you're trying to say?
It's a training operation. They can conduct it any time. So they pick this time to do this means there must be some political implication behind it.
Even in Chinese traditional saying, there's something called killing several birds with one stone. So we're seeing several things going on all at the same time. For example, 1 year since the last time the no-result negotiation between President Trump and Chairman Kim in Vietnam. Also, we see the postponing of the joint military drill between South Korea and the U.S., and at the same time, 2 elections going on later. One is Super Tuesday for U.S. election. The other is parliamentary election for South Korea. So a lot of political things going on all at the same time. And now this gesture coming from DPRK.
Right after the failed summit in Hanoi last year, North Korea has been putting more pressure on the United States. And after multiple rocket launch throughout last year, at the end of last year, North Korea promised to launch a new strategic weapon and to conduct more military provocations. I think that threat was not implemented immediately because of maybe 2 reasons. One is the American assassination of the Iranian General Soleimani that makes the North Korean leader to think twice about conducting any major provocations, and second is maybe related to the outbreak of the coronavirus. But now North Korea has time, and it thinks maybe that this is the right time, given the political events happening in the United States and South Korea. North Korea needs to resume some military provocations gradually, to use this coercive pressure to get the necessary concession it expects from the United States and South Korea.
Mr. Zhao, of course, in Northeast Asia, if you look at the countries, South Korea, Japan, China have all been struggling with the fight against COVID-19. From KCTV, for example, that's a TV station from DPRK, suggesting from the Prime Minister to, common people are fighting with revolutionary efforts against the spread of COVID-19. How much do we know, Mr. Zhao, about the preparedness level of it and also the sophistication of medical supply the DPRK has right now?
Well, there is not much official information from North Korea. There were reports by media that thousands of people are being quarantined in some provinces in North Korea. And given the fact that North Korea is basically in between China and South Korea, where the outbreak of the coronavirus is serious, it is hard for North Korea to escape this epidemic. But I think maybe that's why North Korea is stepping up military pressure at this time, because in addition to the economic sanctions on North Korea, this outbreak of coronavirus might deal another blow to North Korea's economy. And so North Korea has a greater urgency to get rid of the external economic sanctions, and maybe that's related to its recent missile tests. But in terms of humanitarian assistance from outside world to North Korea. Last year, when U.S. and North Korea were negotiating potential deals, as a goodwill gesture, the United States has allowed international humanitarian assistance to go into North Korea. So the multilateral sanctions at this moment should not be a major obstacle for North Korea to receive foreign aid, but it could be a good opportunity for South Korea and the United States to broaden their humanitarian support to break the current diplomatic impasse over the denuclearization negotiation.
Mr. Zhao, of course, we have heard earlier, almost in a joking way, by the U.S. President offering the U.S. help if DPRK needs in terms of support against COVID-19. But now we also see Washington is struggling itself. What shall we see if any help DPRK could have from the international community if the worst-case scenario happened?
Well, I think the sanction committee of the United Nations could provide further exemptions of items that can be exported into North Korea. So far, any metal products, as far as I know, are prohibited from going into North Korea, and that might constrain the international community's ability to help North Korea deal with the coronavirus to some extent. So the U.S. can play a role in asking the UN Sanction Committee to give North Korea more flexibility in importing the necessary medical products that contain medical items, for example, metal items that were previously prohibited. That's one good gesture the United States can convey to North Korea.
On the other hand, Mr. Zhao, we have seen new development as a result of the fight against COVID-19. All the three other Northeast Asian countries are struggling with it, but at the same time, there's a possibility there could be more cooperation among the three nations, South Korea, Japan, and China. Meanwhile, Chinese president was at least regionally scheduling to visit Japan in spring. So a lot of things are going on in Northeast Asia. How would this shall I say, synergy, interactions, in a way, impact on the potential of the issue of Korean Peninsula?
The regional countries can work more closely together to share information, especially given the close ties between Beijing and Pyongyang. I think North Korea can share more information with China, who has more experience in dealing with the coronavirus. And then that effort can be broadened to include South Korea, Japan, and other regional players. Given the epidemic nature of this disease, all these regional countries need to work together in a more institutionalized manner to deal with it. And hopefully this increased medical stuff, exchange, joint effort to work on possible medicine could open another door to inject a new energy into the diplomatic efforts to resolve North Korea's nuclear problem.
Zhao Tong, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Thank you so much, Mr. Zhao. Be healthy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're watching World Insight. Still to come on our program. The scientific community scrambles to find a drug that can cure patients sickened by the new coronavirus. What treatments are in the pipeline? We find out right after this break.
The world is changing fast, taking all our lives with it. But we can change it too, by seeking answers to problems through discussions and debates. On World Insight, I ask direct questions to real people in the know, seek genuine answers, but respect diverse perspectives. Our live global debates tackle the most critical issues head-on. World Insight with Tian Wei go beyond the headlines.
And clinicians.
Vaccine every
Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight. In regards to treating the coronavirus, new pharmaceutical drugs are listed alongside 1,000-year-old traditional Chinese remedies. In the pursuit of curing the coronavirus, where are we now? Earlier, I talked to Sheng Ding, the Dean and Bayer Distinguished Professor at the School of Pharmaceutical Sciences at Tsinghua University. He's also the Institute Director of the Global Health Drug Discovery Institute. Let's listen to what he had to say about all the latest development regarding the drug for COVID-19. I know you and your colleagues have been working around the clock in order to find the remedies to the current novel coronavirus. But let me ask you about the latest development of looking for a potential remedy. Where are we now, according to your latest information?
Certainly from the early sequencing study, what we know is really this novel coronavirus is actually similar to what previously had been found and studied. For example, SARS and MERS. From actually those previous studies, what we have been really doing, and also what many other scientists around the world actually have been doing, is really to apply this so-called drug repurposing approach to find a new treatment, a potential treatment for this novel new coronavirus. The drug repurposing is basically looking through actually what people have previously developed for treating other diseases to find potential therapeutics that can be effective actually against this new coronavirus.
This is already jumping from, let's just say, animal test to immediate human test, and from not available in the market drug to now already in the clinical trials, testing on the real people at a time of crisis. How should we understand both the academic aspect and also the moral aspect of this? Have we thought about some of the other issues that also could be related to this if it did not work out as we wished?
What we heard about is really there's, for example, there's this compassionate use of this drug actually that has not been approved for any diseases called remdesivir, developed by Gilead previously for treating Ebola virus. Certainly, this is a drug candidate that pretty much failed actually in clinical trials, in Ebola virus clinical trials. But again, given its in vitro and also animal model data, it was suggested actually this this molecule, this drug, actually even not approved for treating any disease, actually have some activities against very similar coronaviruses. But again, the compassionate use, this specific category of using unapproved drug for treating human diseases, actually, it's quite narrow. As you point out, actually, for a drug without knowing actually its full safety and efficacy data, and putting that into use in a broader actually range could be actually quite problematic. So it's always in this current situation, it would be really a balance of considering potential drugs efficacy as well as its safety profile.
Yeah. Professor Ding, as you may know, at this moment, for various reasons, some for specific good reasons, others for more tendency of commercial reasons, and others probably even for what some consider could be bad reasons, in order to promote certain drugs or the advocacy of certain drugs or kinds of treatment these days at a time of crisis. This is understandable because things like this happen any time when a crisis like this happens. But how to avoid researchers, academics like you, and those on the front line not being influenced or impacted in their decisions about what to use, what to research about by all of these noises in the society?
I think to really actually avoid or actually to manage such a situation, it's really to provide, especially for authority bodies, to really provide the public and also our medical personnel very specific information and also transparent, open information to really tell the facts. But also on the drug utility or approval process, certainly that has to really involve the regulatory agency.
Right.
Our regulatory agency also worked around the clock to really assess those different applications as well as actually put forward actually certain guidelines and regulations in terms of actually reviewing, evaluating, and also approval of those potential treatment, as well as actually diagnostic kits.
How should we compare the drugs that are being tested and developed vis-a-vis plasma, which is another thing, another front line it seems that people are enthusiastic about? Professor Ding, how would you compare these two roads? Which one would reach Rome first?
I would say if we can find a drug, either small molecule or neutralizing antibody, those actually can be, if we found such drug that is efficacious and safe enough, that can be applied massively to treat, all the patients or many patients fast. However, the plasma from a recovering patient, in principle, some of them may have actually neutralizing antibody against the coronavirus. If the antibody actually concentration is high enough, certainly the plasma actually can be efficacious in terms of treating this disease. But the problem with that is the source is actually very limited, and also that process actually is not completely defined. Again, each recovering patient, they may have a different level of neutralizing antibody, and also different neutralizing antibody, and also their plasma serum actually need to be processed to actually make sure actually those are safe, those not contain other pathogens or other unidentified sort of cytokines, harmful cytokines or other molecules.
So it seems that to me, if you use an analogy, Professor Ding, you're suggesting a plasma type of treatment can be firefighters for a small-scale fire, particularly for those who are extremely burned or injured. However, to treat patients on the front line with such a large number, you still have to rely on therapeutical treatment, eventually related to drugs that needs to come out. Is that what you're trying to say?
I think that's largely correct.
Okay.
Certainly for treating a large population of patients having effective small molecule or antibody actually is very much essential. But also the plasma for a very small scale treatment, I think it's possible. But again, the plasma from each individual is actually not identical. It's different.
Yes.
So actually filtering or selecting plasma actually from actually qualifying, selecting actually therapeutic plasma actually is very limited.
And that's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine. Check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing on behalf of the team. Thanks for watching.